these days it's a very ambiguous topic. Many different forms of meditation, many different kinds of meditation. And then the other part of it is that some people, what brings them to spiritual practice, and particularly maybe meditation, is that they do have some difficulties in life. That's what inspired me, I guess you can say. I was at the University of British Columbia studying engineering. That was very challenging. And I had no knowledge at all, no interest in Buddhism at all. But I had a friend, philosopher Phil, studying arts, the arts, those guys. I was one of the engineers, tough guys. Maybe he was my sort of counter archetype or something. So he gave me a book on Buddhism one time. And I said, oh no, I haven't got any time for this. I got all these texts studying things. He said, oh, maybe just leave it there, Maybe you'll have a chance to look at it. So one day, I think I must have been totally overwhelmed with all this science, and so I picked up this book on Buddhism, and I can't remember too much about it. But after my conclusion was at the end of it, this is science. This isn't religion. This is science, because what I took out of it was based upon the principles of cause and effect, which is to me very scientific. There wasn't any belief system, didn't have to believe it. There was no belief in a creator God, divine power or anything. It was just cause and effect, cause and effect. What you do, you get the result of. You create some causes and there's an effect. Good causes give good effects. Anyway, I couldn't proceed any further than that, except later, I think around the same time, another month later or so, some speakers began to arrive. I'm talking about Buddhism. One was Alan Watts, for the oldies. It's a long time ago. He was very popular in that must have been I was at UBC in '68. So, late '60s. He's a popular writer and speaker on Buddhism, kind of Zen Buddhism anyway. So I went to one of his, philosopher Phil took me to one of his talks. Again, I couldn't understand almost anything he said. But afterwards, the man who convened the meeting, I think he was a professor of religious education or something or other, and so he said, well, if those who are interested want to follow this up with some meditation, sign up and we'll contact you and arrange a little group. And his wife is a yoga teacher. So we met one Saturday and did a bit of meditation and yoga, and did notice something different. Not a lot, but a little bit of difference. My busy mind calming down a little bit. But there's no opportunity to practice Buddhism in Vancouver in 1969, 70. No Thai temples, no temples of any kind, no teachers. So I just put it in the back burners for a while. And eventually I ended up in Sri Lanka for my first contact with a teacher and meditation. And it was quite a transformative experience for me. We'll go into the details later. But generally I found over the years that some people have, maybe you can say, kind of a spiritual calling. They're seekers. Others, they come to spiritual practice because they have some real challenges, real crisis in their life, and it really shakes them up. And unfortunately, if you are in a state of major crisis, it's not the best time to learn meditation. Because the first movement of Buddhist meditation is learning to calm the mind down. And if you're really wound up with your emotional turmoil, very hard to calm the mind down. Okay, it probably is very helpful for you, but very difficult to do. It's better to learn about it, the principles of meditation, and ideally have some experience in the basics as a good foundation. And then when challenges come along, and they will eventually in our life, we have some tools to use to deal with them in a more skillful way. Whereas if we don't have these tools, people have, of course, their different coping strategies. they either end up in intoxication or going to a psychiatrist or something, or having a breakdown or something. But the Buddha's teaching is specifically aimed at learning how to come to the end of suffering. So in a way, challenges can be very, very helpful. Like my teacher Ajahn Chah used to, if there were difficulties in the monastery, he would say, "Oh, good, that's fuel for wisdom." I mean, it wasn't very pleasant, but he put it in a positive spin on it, so you could rise to the challenge rather than just saying, "Oh God, poor me," and how to get out of this situation, and I got to get away from here, and it's my bad karma. That's a Buddhist one, with bad karma. He said, "Oh, it's good, it'll challenge you to rise up above it, wisdom now." However, it's helpful if we have tools that we can do that. Otherwise, we're just challenged to the limit, perhaps, of overwhelm, and we just are paralyzed and can't do anything about it. So the Buddha gives us some particular tools to use, and it's within the Buddha's teachings are contained within a whole spiritual context. To me, it's more of a way of life rather than a belief system. It's something that we need to try to live in our everyday life to be able to function with it, make it useful in our life practically. Unfortunately, many times we learn about something like Buddhism or meditation as sort of an extra little technique for our life. I have my guitar lessons and my piano lessons, and I have meditation too on a Thursday night. And okay, it is, in one context, maybe in the relative context, that's helpful too. But, if we don't live those teachings in a practical way, then they don't really become part of us. They aren't really integrated into our life. It is something on the top of our head that, if I remember it, I'll do it. And, it does have some effect in those situations, perhaps a limited effect. But the subject, the topic of challenges, or more specifically suffering or difficulty in life, these existential challenges, old age, sickness, and death, we will all have to face them. And these are very, very fundamental aspects of human life. If we have the skillful tools well grounded within us, then we can use them as challenges to rise up to wisdom, possibly to full awakening even in this lifetime. So the key element, especially which interested me anyway about Buddhism, was a practice of meditation, which has to do with mental development. And my challenge was that my mind was kind of spinning out of control. As I tell people these days, when we go to school in the West anyway, they are very good at telling you how to turn your brain on, but nobody tells you how to turn it off. And I got very good at turning my brain on. I was quite a good student. I got a scholarship to UBC. But the brain can go many different ways. You turn it on to learn all this information and pass the exams and all this, but if it turns against you, the brain can become also a master of hell for you too. You start to have difficulties, and your mind starts to worry and be fearful and all these things. Then, as much as you turn the brain on, that also can turn into negativity, can turn into a hellish state of mind as well. So, what the Buddha's teachings is about is how to work with your mind. And first of all, how to understand how the mind works, and then how to, you can say, at a certain level, to train it, and then how to work with it in a skillful way, that this mind can become your best friend. It can become the true source of well-being, happiness, and wisdom in your life. Or it can, make you crazy too, if you don't know how to work with it. It can be your best friend or your worst enemy. So fortunately I had the chance to go to Sri Lanka I was just traveling, basically traveling, and then I found myself in India, second year of my travels, and then I happened to meet a friend who I met before. He was going to Sri Lanka, and we're both riding bicycles through India. So this was in Goa, so he's going to Sri Lanka, and I said, I'm going that way too, you know, I'll tag along with you. So he was going to a Buddhist monastery in Sri Lanka, and I met him before in Israel, and he had told me many stories about this, about being at Buddhist monasteries in Sri Lanka. So I went with him, but at this monastery we went to, I'd already studied a little bit, you know, heard some lectures, I wanted to meditate and do something. So at this monastery there weren't any teachers. So they told me, if you want to meditate, go to this meditation center. So I decided to book myself in. So the teacher there spoke English and could give some guidance to the Westerners. There was half a dozen of us or so practicing there. And so it was, I probably, if I'd been left to my own devices, I wouldn't have done it very seriously. But in this meditation center, it was all set up. It was just only there, people only there for meditation practice. So no reading, writing, speaking. You get 19 hours a day, only allowed 5 hours sleep, just to practice meditation. Sit and walk, sit and walk. Even going for the meal. We had a certain ritual of walking mindfully to the meal hall, having our meal very slowly, trying to be aware of every mouth of food, and walking back again. So it was my first experience of meditation. You can imagine it was quite a shock. After having been a wanderer for 2.5 years, or a year and a half already. But I realized, it occurred to me, you know, when will this chance ever happen again? Here I am, you know, some country boy from Surrey, BC, find myself in Sri Lanka in a Buddhist monastery with a teacher there who speaks English and give me instructions and guidance. I better make use of this situation. Never happen again in my life. Little did I know that I'd be doing the same thing. For 40 years. Anyway, I stayed there for a month, and I had my ups and my downs, lots of downs, and a couple of ups. But the ups were really up. Your mind does calm down. It's the most exhilarating experience you ever can imagine. You can't even imagine it, actually. You can't imagine most people. When your mind finally goes quiet, and it's just like your mind's open to the universe. But that was only a few moments. The rest was down in the depths of hell, I think. But at the end of it, after a month, the teacher said, "Okay, your month is up, out the street." And that was a real shock too, a real psychic shock. To be in this very, very quiet and controlled environment, and the next day on the road in the street waiting for a bus to Colombo. And then 3 days later they had a civil war in Sri Lanka. It wasn't my fault. I already noticed that my mind was spinning so much anyway. But then the hardest thing was trying to integrate that experience into ordinary life. Because the environment in the meditation monastery is so artificial, which can be helpful. I mean, it's like a little bit like a classroom situation where you go and you spend your time focusing on learning to read and write. But then when you go home, it's a little bit not quite so confined, not so formal. So, and then when I went back to university again in British Columbia, it was even worse, because here I was filling my mind full of more information, and then I tried to sit quietly in the evening, and it all came back again. Blah, 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 blah. Not to mention my next door neighbor was a rock musician. finally, I did realize that on one hand, this did work. Basically, the more you do the practice, it's not just more in terms of time. You need to put some effort into it. You need to have some perseverance, to have some encouragement. And what the Buddha calls the middle way is a certain amount of moderation. Just using only willpower is not enough. It needs to have a certain amount of trust and learn to listen to your mind and feel the situation. But it's very hard to do that all by myself. So I thought, oh, maybe I should, while I'm still free of debt and commitments, I should try and see if this can be replicated again. And this time I thought I'd go to Thailand, because somebody told me many meditation masters in Thailand. Of course, what they didn't tell me was that the unfortunate thing is there are lots of meditation masters in Thailand, but hardly any speak English. You're going to stay for 5 years and learn Thai. So I took a year out and went traveling to Thailand. And I thought I'd just do the same thing as in Sri Lanka, just stay for a month, get enlightened, and go home. Well, unfortunately, it would be 3 weeks to find a meditation monastery. So I thought, okay, my plans are already upset. So in those days in Thailand, you get a visa for 1 month. So I had to renew my visa for 1 month. Back to Thailand, stayed in Thailand again for another month. At the end of 1 month, still not enlightened. Okay, maybe 3 months. This went on for 9 years. I'm still working on it. So go back to Thailand again on Tuesday. The next course. Continuing course. But the thing I did learn about it was that, while on one hand, it is based upon, all the Buddhist teachings are based upon the principle of cause and effect. So you put in the right causes and you get the effect. However, when it comes to the human mind is very, very complex. There's very different levels and varieties to it, and various levels of intentionality, which is a very fundamental part of Buddhist psychology, is intention, because that's what's called kamma or karma. What we intend is the basis for what we do. What we do has a result. So working with the human mind is not so simple as simple cause and effect. In fact, the Buddha calls it conditional causality. So when I went to Thailand the second time, well, the first time, seeking for meditation the second time, I thought very simplistically, I just stay there for a month and do the exercises. Went to a quiet monastery and sat there, meditated for 16 hours a day, walking and sitting, walking and sitting. And the mind got very, very peaceful. But the peace there was only temporary. In Buddhist meditation, there's 2 movements to it. We call it calm and insight meditation. First movement is towards calming down the mind, and for most people, when the mind is calmer, they're able to see more clearly. Insight meditation in the Pali language, vipassana, literally means clearer seeing. Passana means seeing, and vi means accentuated seeing. So it's a different way of viewing your mind, different way of viewing reality. Most people, they look at reality and they just notice it for a moment. They get a fleeting glimpse of, say, a sense impression. Then the mind starts interpreting it. Oh, it's this way, it's that way. Reminds me of this and the other. So you spend most of your time interpreting what you've glimpsed in a millisecond. But if your mind can calm down to a certain level, the mind doesn't interpret anymore. It calms down the interpretive, the reactive capacity of the mind, and you can just see. The mind can be totally quiet enough that you can just observe a non-judgmental awareness and observation. You don't need any interpretation, you don't need any label even. You just have this present moment awareness. This is the way it is right now. No judgments. And with that, there's also no problem. This is the way it is. When your judgments say, that's nice, next thought is, I want it. That's not nice. How to get away from it, how to escape from it, how to push it away. And then the stories go on from there. It's called life. If your mind calms down to a certain degree, you begin to see more clearly the way things are. Then a certain amount of equanimity sets in, because this is the way it is. It doesn't have to be exciting, it doesn't have to be depressing, it's just the way it is like this. And initially, you just have glimpses of this, like special moments, but then it can be increased. As one learns to integrate this way of seeing into one's life, it becomes a way of being then. And everything is fine. No problems anymore. I mean, that's, ultimately, I guess, at the end. And now for 40 years, my problems are a little bit less. Problems at the edges of perception now. So in the practice of Buddhist meditation, the most important part of it is the practice of it. Easy enough to know the theory. The theory is very simple. We sit down, focus on meditation objects, such as the breathing. Breathing is the most universal and common meditation object, so it's generally used most prominently in Buddhist teachings. And then, just that there's the exercise. Focus, sit down and try and watch your breathing. Very simple, that's it. Try and do it now. Maybe you can watch your breath for a millisecond and, is this right? I wonder what's right. Is this not right? Is this experience pleasant? I wonder what's going on. What am I doing here anyway? But if you persist with it to a certain degree, just keep bringing your attention back to the breathing, for example, or any meditation object, kind of basically, but some of them are more helpful for developing calm meditation and insight meditation. Like breathing is very helpful because it's very universal, and we have breathing with us all the time. You can take maybe something like a special image. There are 40 different meditation subjects in Buddhism, 40 different ones. Some of them are colors, some are more abstract principles. But the abstract principles, then you have to still think about them to a certain degree. So using them, your mind will not reach a really deep level of calm. And you still got to think about them. So there's some degree of thinking going on. Although the thinking is ideally very skillful and helpful and peaceful, but it doesn't really help the mind grow really, really deeply calm. And some of them are more difficult to turn into an insight meditation object. As I mentioned, there are two movements. One is the focusing of attention. So the mind settles on one object, called concentration on an object. And when you're concentrated upon this object, you forget everything else. So there just is breathing. You can develop it to a certain degree, and at a certain point you may notice there's only breathing. Nothing else. No breather, and thus no problems. Just breath flowing in and flowing out naturally. And this is real. We're all breathing all the time, as long as you're alive. But then that could be a very powerful experience. However, the bigger picture is that because the mind is focused on one thing, it just seems that everything else is resolved. But it just puts all the problems to sleep. Because you haven't given them attention, they aren't stirred up in your consciousness, it's like they've just gone to sleep, been deactivated. Then you let go of the breathing, and they all come back again. Here they are. Welcome, good morning, here I am again. They're still there, still present. We haven't really investigated their true nature. All these things are impermanent. They arise and they pass away. They arise and they pass away. But when we just focus on one meditation object and have some degree of focused attention and concentration, we just don't see everything else. But in insight meditation, we observe now what this other stuff is. We observe, say, for example, some of our thoughts arising. And maybe some of these thoughts are pleasant, some are unpleasant. You can observe where they come from, what's triggering them off. Why am I thinking about this? Why am I worrying about the past, for example? The past is finished. Sorry, you're wasting your time. You're burning up brain cells uselessly. The past is finished. Why are you worrying about all the details of the future when it's totally unknown? You can have some general plan of the future, but there's a limit to how much you can plan every single detail. So you recognize the limits of what is useful and helpful, where your mind starts to get agitated or gets worried or gets frightened about what you're thinking about, and is it helpful? Nope, not very helpful. Okay, back to the breath again. You can just drop it. And when we are able to find out the ultimate source of the disturbances in our mind, for example, they all go back to relating to our sense of self. Most of them are about ourself. I like this, I should go there, I should do this, I should do... Well, the Buddha's deepest, most profound insight was, hey, that sense of self actually is a little bit of an illusion. It doesn't have any reality in itself, ultimately. It's there as a kind of a practical point of reference that doesn't really have any ultimate reality to it. It's just like a bit of a mirage. And if you look more closely, if I were to ask you, okay, who is you really? What is your true nature? What is your real true nature? Anybody ever thought of that? I can hear the brains working. Just look beyond your eye. What is really yourself? You take to be yourself. Is it your body? Why not? Because it's changing, huh? It's changing all the time. I mean, I'm not the same. This body's not the same when it was born. Huh? I don't think I was born like this. Wasn't born this old. Is it your memories? Is your memories your true self? Why not? Because I forgot a lot about myself. What is yourself anyway? What is I? For many people, it's because they don't have an answer for it. They just say, "Oh, it's I. It's me. It must be me. Not anybody else. Must be me almost by default." But you ask, well, who is your real I, your real self? Don't look at it that way. It's kind of the last answer, the simplest answer you come up with. But rather than speculate all about this, the Buddha gives us these teachings about meditation practice, which are, on one part, they are mental development. So developing certain qualities of mind. We can say very basically is concentration and awareness, or sometimes the word mindfulness is used. Because unfortunately nowadays mindfulness, people have heard of mindfulness? It's become a little bit of a cliche word, and many times it's been used out of context now from the Buddha's teachings. It's become a system of relaxation or stress release or something, rather than a way to spiritual awakening. But that's why I usually translate it as awareness. Awareness, we all have some degree of concentration and awareness. They're innate to all human beings. But the Buddha realized that if we cultivate them, develop them, make a conscious effort to develop them, they can become spiritual powers. Very, very powerful qualities of mind. These are innate qualities in all of us, and initially the ego takes them over. So like awareness, you're aware of things that support your ego, your view of the world. But it's there, awareness is there before the ego was. Where the ego just takes it over and controls it, manipulates it, and keeps the world, my worldview, under control. But now if we develop this awareness itself, it begins to gain power, and it becomes more powerful, you can say, than the ego. And then it begins to observe, be aware of what we take to be ourselves. Becomes aware of the ego. Now it's investigating ego, and it's exposing all its limitations and all its dark places and secrets. But at the same time, this is an unfolding process, and so it's actually very liberating. Because, as I mentioned, this sense of self, it is not an ultimate reality. It's a helpful charade, you know. We need a point of reference in this chaotic universe. So it's very helpful. But we overvalue it. We give it too much power over our life. And then it begins to control you. It controls your concentration. It controls your awareness. When these two qualities, and they can be developed to be more powerful than the ego. So as we develop these qualities, we begin to get a different understanding of the world. And this, the key to it is that when these qualities are developed, you begin to observe the way things really are. Buddha didn't tell you what to see. Just that we're learning to see things as they really are. And fortunately, most of us probably, we see things, you know, basically as they are. But this is now seeing things as they really are, from an ultimate point of view. And you still keep connected with the way things sort of relatively are. Otherwise you can't talk to your friends anymore. Because you live in a different world. But then you can talk to more people, because you can talk to people from different levels of reality, like different levels of consciousness. But it's a developmental process which is possible for everybody, although I would say there is a meditative process going on. I mean, we move through different stages in this process. And some of it can be, you know, a bit challenging in the sense that maybe some of our beliefs become challenged. Believing in the importance of my own self, for example. And then when it begins to become revealed, the limitations of it begin to become more revealed, so it can kind of shake up your world a bit. But at the same time, when you develop a quality like awareness, you have this experience, well, yes, maybe it shakes up the world, but this is real. My world that I believed in was not real. It was out of harmony with reality. And that was causing a lot of friction and confusion and doubt and worry and fear. And the way things really are is very peaceful. So in the development of this meditation exercises, and you know, the Buddha gave us particular exercises to follow, and there are certain qualities which are supportive of it. I would say that the most important one is the continuity. And maybe we're inspired either by, say, curiosity or by some need right now. And then when we develop meditation to a certain degree, we may get some results. The more that we do the practice, the more results we get, favorable results. Then we can think, oh, that's it. And sometimes when they just have their difficulties resolved, then they stop. But then maybe later another difficulty arises, and then they aren't prepared for it. Life throws challenges at us at all different levels. So the more that we can use this as a way of being, the more that we're able to relate to all the challenges in life. So the first level, the first movement of Buddhist meditation, as I mentioned, is towards calmness of mind. And this is taking up meditation object, spending some time just to sit quietly and bring your attention to the meditation object, to the breathing. You observe the breathing breathing, and if thoughts come up, disturbances come up, you notice them, back to the breathing again, back to the breathing, back to the breathing. And we can't say how long this will take. Some people are easily understand, say they have some kind of talent with it. Maybe after a very short time, the mind calms down. I've met people, especially living in Asian countries like Thailand. Some people there, they have natural talent for these exercises. I mean, Buddhists talk about past lives and things. Don't want to talk about ghost stories now. But they believe in past lives, you see. So maybe they've developed meditation in the past life, and in this life they have the talent for it. And some of them can just sit down and be very peaceful, very easily. And the other extreme is that some people they're challenged continuously. I was one of the challenged people. I turned my mind on too much and had too many thoughts, you see. So I needed to use meditation to kind of keep my mind in balance. But I had a lot of challenges too. But when the mind did calm down, sometimes it was quite a powerful experience. When I was my first ordination was as a novice in Thailand, and was at the meditation center. And there was two of us there at the time. There was myself and a German man, and I was staying in another temple actually. I had to come to this one to do the ceremony. So when I was there, learning the chanting and all that, I met this German man, and he'd come from a tradition that's called TM, Transcendental Meditation. It's basically an exercise in concentration. So he told the teacher, "Oh yes, I know how to meditate. You just sit down and watch the breath." And the teacher was teaching insight meditation. And he said, no, that's not right. It's not enough just sitting there watching the breath. It's not insight. It's just calming the mind. He said, and then this German man, he couldn't understand it. So he said, "Give you a lesson." He said, come to the temple, come to the main meditation hall. So we came there, and then there was, in this monastery, there was this naughty novice, I call him. There's a young man. Most of the novices in Thailand, they're under 20 years of age. They're young boys. And this novice would be running around. He'd be throwing rocks at the dogs, and he was really a bit of an annoyance in a meditation center. So the teacher called this novice in, and then the German novice was a bit surprised. Who's he? He can't meditate. He's so restless and very aggressive to the dogs and things. Why? And the teacher told this novice to sit down. So he sat there and he said, "Okay, meditate." So the novice sat there. Deep meditation, just like that. The teacher lifted up his arm and stuck a needle into it. Nothing. And then he said, "Okay, come out of it." Out of it again and start throwing rocks at the dogs. he said, "Concentration, no wisdom." Apparently this young boy could do this from an early age, just sit there. He's off deep concentration. And of course, I guess his parents don't know what to do with him, send him to the monastery. So in Buddhist meditation, the basis is calm, but then we move into the second movement of insight meditation. That is from some degree of calm, and it's a little bit controversial how much calm you need in the mind. I prefer my teacher, Ajahn Chah's guidance. I went around, as Barry mentioned, I traveled around mostly northeast Thailand, but also North Thailand, and visited many meditation masters. That was one of my questions: how much calm do we need? And most of them were very adept at concentration. So they said, "Oh, you need at least the fourth level of absorption." So very, very deep concentration. And I thought, wow, that'll take me several lifetimes, that one. With my busy mind. And that was the traditional way for many of the teachers. You develop very, very deep levels of concentration, and then you change to insight meditation. When you change to insight meditation, your mind is so calm and so powerful and so lucid. You turn to the insight meditation, very quickly you have insight. But that wasn't my path. So then I asked Ajahn Chah how much calm we need. He said, just calm enough. Yeah, but what's that? He wouldn't say anymore, just calm enough. And it took me several, maybe years even, to really realize the profundity of that, because each person's different. Some people have a natural tendency, say, to insight meditation. Others, like this novice, young novice, he wouldn't be able to develop insight meditation perhaps unless he has a teacher. He's very good at concentration, but insight, reflection, contemplation, not very likely for him, is he? So some people don't need a lot of concentration or calmness of mind, and then they can easily turn to insight meditation. Others, perhaps their mind is too busy. As soon as they try to observe the causes of their thoughts and start thinking about them, perhaps they need a bit more calmness of mind. And also, each time is different. Each time you work with your mind, it can be different. Some days, maybe you take up your meditation object and your mind is, hey, it's calm already. What did I do right today? Other days you can try as hard as you want to watch your breath, and your mind just does not quieten down. It just goes on and on and on. So calm enough. And the other part of it is, which was also one of the key aspects of Ajahn Chah's teachings, was you have to know for yourself. Here I was more or less telling him what degree of calm I needed. Well, he says, don't ask me, you find out. You got to find out for yourself. He didn't want people to be dependent upon somebody else telling them what they have to do in spiritual practice. You need to experiment with it and find out for yourself. What's your level of calm? And it's different, say different every time, and different at different levels of experience. Sometimes, especially if I stay in my quiet cave in northeast Thailand for a little while, I don't need to do any focusing concentration practice at all. It's so quiet and peaceful there. Just being in that quiet environment, your mind is already quiet. The problem is that maybe it's too quiet sometimes, and it takes a little bit of disturbance sometimes to be able to observe that, oh, gee, I'm still not enlightened. When you aren't disturbed, it's easy to be an enlightened master, you see. It's when you have disturbances that it's a real test, you see. If you still have greed and aversion. And so the first movement towards calm meditation, and we can, some people maybe they are inclined to develop this for quite some time. And be helpful, I would say, especially if you're developing deeper levels of calm, to have a teacher with you. Because as your mind calms down, some of the unconscious elements that you haven't been attending to will come to the surface. It's like many of us are a certain level of consciousness, and this is our familiar world we're functioning at. And things that don't quite fit in there, we push underground, you see. When your mind calms down to a different level, then it exposes some of those things you haven't been attending to, the unconscious contents. And some of them begin to come to the surface. I mean, ideally, if your meditation is not too intense, you just observe them. Yes, okay, these kind of strange images and memories can come up, and even certain psychosomatic ailments can come up, and it's all risk for the mill. You just observe it, and after a while it'll pass away. Sometimes it can be very strange and very challenging. What does this mean? If you have a teacher, they can just say, mostly they just say, oh yeah, all right, continue. But it's helpful to have somebody there to tell you to continue, otherwise you wonder what's going on. Am I going crazy, or is this the right way, or whatever? And for in extreme cases, there can be even sometimes, very strong impressions and images arising. Especially if there are a lot of contents in your mind you haven't dealt with before. Buried skeletons in your closet or something. But it's all just impermanent phenomena. All this stuff just arises and passes away. It's like we've gone to see a bad movie or something. So it's imprinted in our memory. Then you go home at night and it's replayed again. Just all impressions. If you don't take it so personally, you just view it as contents of mind. Everything arises and passes away eventually. It's when some of these contents arise and we identify with them. Oh, this is my terrible thought, or I'm frightened now. And then you hang on to the fear and you confirm it. You don't allow it to arise and pass and flow away, like all mental phenomena will arise and pass. So it's going to be quite hard to maintain that equanimity, just to observe. Everything comes and goes, comes and goes. And then after, some degree of experience in calm, and there's many different levels of calm, you have to find out for yourself what level is calm enough. Then you can turn to the insight meditation. It's not quite so black and white. Like some teachers, like I mentioned, they teach getting into the fourth absorption, very deep concentration, and then changing to insight meditation. Ajahn Chah's approach, as I appreciated myself, was that he did a little bit of both, integrated the two. So he introduced, first of all, some exercises in focusing your attention, and some degree of calm, and they said, okay, now try to observe what's going on in your mind right now. So say an initial level of calm, there's still a few thoughts there. The most active and the busiest thoughts are quieting down, but there's still some thoughts going on. So turn your awareness now to those thoughts. What kind of thoughts are happening now? About the past, about the future, about certain people, certain situations, and you can observe them now from as it were, you become an observer of them, rather than a thinker of them. Observing these thoughts, you begin to notice, is that thought helpful? Here I am, like I mentioned, thinking about the past. Well, the past is gone. What am I doing that for? Trying to relive the past. So, okay, drop it. Forget about it. It's a wasted mental energy now. So you learn to let go of those thoughts about the past, and then you find there's more space in your mind. You can observe a bit more clearly, a bit more broadly, mental activity going on. Oh, there's this heaviness of heart here. What's that about? Oh, maybe there's some old heartbreak. Begin to notice more subtler levels of your mental activity. On one retreat I gave in Switzerland, I think it was the second night. Usually the first night I talk about this calm meditation. And the second night, I give these exercises in insight meditation. I just basically say that if your mind seems to be calm enough, you don't need to keep focusing on the breathing. Let go of the breathing and observe where your mind goes. And I said that, and 2 minutes later, the woman crashed. She fainted. Oh, what happened? What did I say? And she woke up, she got up, and then she ran out the room. So I saw her the next morning at breakfast. What happened? What was it? She said, you said that just to observe the mind. And I noticed that there's this anxiety in me. And I've had this anxiety here all the time and never noticed it before. I was glad I didn't create the anxiety. But she did recognize it's been there all the time, but she never looked at it before. And now the first time she noticed, she's always anxious. Well, it's not very pleasant But I would say it's very helpful to know that. You know, before this anxiety gets so powerful it takes you over, you had an anxiety attack. In that situation, she had already some degree of calm, obviously, to be able to observe this, and some degree of awareness to be the observer of it, the witness of it. And for a moment, she wasn't it, you see. If you're observing it, you're not it. If you're the observer, which this is what the word Buddha means, the one who knows, the one who's observing this now. He puts you in a different position now. Oh, there is this, and maybe at the beginning it was quite a shock because not only did she see the anxiety, but she saw her own blindness to the anxiety. So that was maybe even more shocking. She hadn't seen it before. But when you become more aware of it, what's that about? And then understanding and knowing, at least in theory, that Buddhist teachings are all based upon the principle of cause and effect. This anxiety is not the ultimate reality. It's only an effect of some deeper cause. So then, with the possibility, okay, where's it coming from? What's behind it now? We can learn to unpack it. And gradually, the more of this stuff we learn to unpack, the more lighter our heart becomes, the more spacious our mind becomes, step by step. So, sound interesting? What's the time now? Ooh, already an hour. Maybe I can't talk for 4 hours. No, too much talk. I was going to have maybe some time for questions, perhaps. Questions so far. I've covered a lot of ground, haven't I? Calm and insight meditation.
Could you say something about compassion in the development of the mind?
Well, it is one of the meditation subjects in Buddhism. It's one of the main ones. So when I would say that initially we take something general like breathing as a meditation object. And then if you notice you have certain blockages or certain challenges with certain things, then perhaps you can look at other meditation objects and bring them in to kind of act as a kind of a counter or as a support for working with these particular issues or something. Otherwise, I would say that it becomes kind of a natural process already. Because if you understand your own mind, you know other people too. So you can empathize with them. You can have compassion for them. I mean, the word compassion, I don't know if you understand what translation you have, but most people think compassion is, I'm feeling sorry for you, in pity for you. But from the Latin, calm passion is being learning to literally suffer with. Passion is suffering and calm is with. So you're with the other person's suffering. Well, to me, you can't do that until you with your own suffering first. When you've really been able to open up to your own suffering, then you can empathize with other people and be with their suffering as well. Otherwise, it becomes like this, a little bit a judgmental attitude of, I'm having compassion for you because I'm so wonderful and you're suffering so much. That's not real empathy, not real compassion. So when you've dealt with your own suffering, then you understand other people's suffering and you can connect with them at that level.
I just wonder how you keep yourself from becoming too much into someone else's suffering. There has to be some boundary.
Yep.
Yeah, and if you do work where you're working with people that are suffering, you need to have compassion and empathy, but you can also start to think that you're maybe going too far into it. You have to step back. And that's just something that you would know, I guess, by instinct, by your own feelings.
Well, I would say that if you get to you're observing your own mind, say like in what we call insight meditation formally, but I mean you're observing your own states of mind, your own reactions, situations. You get to know yourself. You get increased self-awareness of what is your so-called self, your own limits, where your emotions start to get diffused with other people, and where you're holding back, when you can let go, and if your own mind is settled and stable enough that you can take on more. You begin to know this and get a sense for it. But I think people who don't know themselves very well, and they can easily be even manipulated, because they don't know what their boundaries are, what their limits are, where they're strong and where they're weak. But if you get to you're observing with some consistency your own states of mind, you begin to notice these situations when you feel more vulnerable, better withdraw and recharge.
In meditation, so you would begin with calm, and then ideally at some point you're going to slip into insight, and then you may come up with those blockages, and then you may say, now I need compassion, but how do you set a purpose, or do you set a purpose, or do you just allow your meditation to go where it takes you and stay there? So in other words, now I'm starting to get a little willy-nilly in my meditation, and maybe what I really need is calm, or maybe I need to stop at insight.
I mean, I would say it's a bit like any I don't mean, if practice is too general, but any kind of thing, like riding a bicycle. You start off with the basics, kind of from the book, and you learn how to do the basics, and then you get a bit more of a sense for, now I can experiment a little bit. So it's a little bit of a combination between, especially in our tradition, there is quite clearly defined kind of guidelines and directions, but then you have to also open up to your own particular idiosyncrasies, or your own temperament or something like this too. But we always have the main teachings to refer back to. It's kind of the center line, to come back to them again. So you don't, if you just stay with the basic teachings, it just becomes too mechanical, too formalized. It's not going to work. But if you, the other side of it is, if you get too involved with your own intuitions and your own feelings and your own ideas, then maybe you lose that center line too. You get too involved with, you get more too self-indulgent, if there's a word. So you have both of these trying to back and forth, checking it out. Is this, this in conformity with the standard teachings? Is this sort of other people's experience? Or am I going too far off? Or too lost in my own stuff? But at the same time, I've got to find my own way in this. So it needs a little bit of both. Applying the standard form, the center line as it were, and your own experimentation. And with the basic, Buddha gave quite a few different teachings about how to deal with different difficulties. Yeah. But also, having to find out how to relate to our own particular form of those difficulties. Then we had experiment. There's a word for this, they call it skillful means. To find your own skillful means how to work with this. The Buddha gave a whole list of certain skillful means for the basics. How to work with anger, for example. But then each one of us has our own brand and form of anger. So maybe, at least in the initial stages, using the Buddha's guidelines is very helpful. Get a good overview of anger in general. Then to get more deeper, you have to kind of specify it or refine it to suit your own type of anger, for example. So you got the formal teachings, and then you got your own informal teachings, how you learn from your own experiments and experience yourself. That sort of what you're answering your question?
Yeah, that's been good. Yeah.
When you're not meditating, how do you keep that calmness? Like you said, you wake up and they're all back with, oh, well, all your problems. How do you keep that?
Well, there is formal meditation, like having periods of formal exercise of actually intending to focus on the breathing. And then, because we're changing the state of our mind, even when you are not doing the formal exercise, there usually is some follow-on. Maybe not so intensely. That experience of feeling centered and calm doesn't continue after the exercise so intensely, but there still is some carry through. So if you look around in your life now, what situations in life support this calm, can nourish it, can keep it growing, and what things disturb it? And then, if you really appreciate this calm and you find it's really useful, then you have to change your life to flow with those situations which will cultivate your calm and keep it nourished, and try to at least limit those ones which can be very disturbing and turbulent. I know some people who have taken up spiritual practice, they've totally changed their life. They've quit their job because it was too stressful, and they realize that this quality of life is much more important than making lots of money. There was one of our friends in Switzerland. He had a metal factory, and he was working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. Made a lot of money, and he gave some of it to us. When he started doing meditation more often, he realized that he just can't live like this. He's just sprung out, and it's so stressful for him. So he decided he had to change. So he sold his factory, and he took up a job working with handicapped children, which was a part of himself he never developed. He was this, doing mechanics, see, just with machines and materials. Never had worked with people like that. So this totally changed what he was doing, and he was working now with handicapped children, and he really had to open to them and be more compassionate and empathetic to them, and at the same time getting into touch with that part of himself, which he never before was able to get in contact with. And he took a drastic cut in income, but he said, that's much more important to me. As far as my life goes, this is my life. You can be at the end of his life, be a billionaire, and be totally stressed out. Is that the meaning of life? And this was from a man from Switzerland. That was really radical. That's what I mean by integrating this into your life. You see, that once you've contacted some degree of calm, and if you realize it's really important, really precious, you'll know how to keep it going. There's a formal exercises which help you to some degree, but even monks can't stay all the time in retreat. And that was one of Ajahn Chah's teachings, was teaching monks, to try to use. Okay, it was still in the limits of a monastery, but trying to use all of our activities as a source of collectedness and calm and awareness. So sometimes he would change the whole schedule in the monastery. So people who got used to a certain habitual routine of being calm with certain routines, you change it around and then see what happens. Some people, the meditation was turned upside down because the routine was upside down. But then he would remind us that everything we do, sweeping the leaves was meditation. Going for alms round was meditation. Eating your food was meditation. And for some people, especially there were some of the Westerners who went to Thailand, seeking these spiritual teachings, and their view was spiritual teachings were meditation, formal meditation, not sweeping leaves, but formal sitting there. And somebody came, some Westerner came there, who'd been doing these intensive retreats, and he said, how come the monks, they don't do hardly any formal sitting meditation? And Shaw said, well, I've seen chickens sit on eggs for days and not get any wiser. If you look around in your life, there are situations that do encourage calm, going for a walk on the beach or something, and others maybe are very stressful. And there are some which, are in between. And it's how you use your time then. For example, if you just have to wait for a bus or something, what do you do with your mind? You watch your breath and calm your mind down, or you start worrying, oh, I didn't do that. Oh, what if this happens? What if that happens? The bus comes and, what was I here for? But if you use that free time, as it were, to train your mind in a more skillful way, the result is calm and more clarity, rather than worry and fear and anxiety. It's up to us how we use our mind.
Can you say a little bit about using intention in meditation as well as in daily life, especially intention toward the wholesome?
Mm-hmm. Well, intention is, as I mentioned already briefly, that was a very significant aspect in Buddha's teaching, because from intention, what I intend or what I will, then becomes a foundation for activity usually. Not always, but depends upon the intensity of the intention. So, I mean, there's different, I can say, levels of consciousness about intention too. You can consciously make an intention towards something, sort of set your mind in that direction. And other times it's in the background of your mind already. Like people who, somebody asked me about, I think it was yesterday, somebody asked a question about commitment to spiritual practice. And I said, well, there's different levels of commitment too. I mean, from my own life, after 40 years as a monk, I've seen lots of people coming and going. And one of my little pet projects is to kind of study what it is that gives people the incentive to stay, and why they leave, what takes them out of the spiritual path, particularly the roads. But and then what I keep coming back to is there's something like an intention to find the truth or something. It's very vague. It's hard to put your finger on, but some intention about authenticity or truthfulness or something like that, which is in the background, and some people maybe have it intuitively, and then maybe later in life it kind of, when the worldly duties have kind of finished off, tailed off, it comes to the surface, and these aspirations towards spiritual practice arise or something. Before, it was there all the time, but they couldn't serve it because they got involved with career and family and all these things, and it was in the background all the time. Others can bring it to the surface more. What's your intention? There is the kind of a little bit of a little bit of thing you have to watch out for, is that intention is also, and can be also, it's related to ego, to self. The old saying, where there's a will, there's a way. But what do you will? I will be rich. So it is a self-activity, and it can be taken over by the self. So you could be a will to become more egotistical, or you're not intentionally, but the intention can be to dominate, and then it increases your egoism or something or other too. So you have to be careful how intention is used. You see, so be aware of that possibility. It's like a neutral force, but depends on how you're using it, you see. Whether it's using it for very simply skillful or unskillful ways. It can be used to increase your ego or helps to attenuate your ego. So that's what the whole basis of karma is, you see. The Buddha talks about the skillful actions, unskillful actions, and very simply, the skillful ones lead towards selflessness, and they'll have a positive, more beneficial result of well-being. The unskillful ones increase the ego, and increasing the ego, which is not an ultimate reality, you're creating an illusion. You're creating a new demon, you see, and the result is going to be not very beneficial. It's going to be, in the end, it's going to be very disappointing and possibly tragic. That's what, the purpose of things like morality and generosity is. These are, ideally, they are based upon creating skillful attitudes and skillful actions. I mean, if we don't understand morality, we think we're being forced to be good guys, good people, But the point is, the Buddha is giving us these guidelines. We say in our tradition, when people take on these guidelines for skillful living, you voluntarily undertake them to help you guide you in a skillful way. And if you make a mistake and you fail, well, you try again. And you don't get punished by any superior power. The Buddha's not watching over you and checking you out and deducting points, merit points from you. But you see the result for yourself. You see how it increases your egoism, or positive or negatively. The advanced class, huh? Everybody knows already.
Well, maybe you could, one question too.
Nope.
Who was that?
Jesus happened to leave now. He has to open a restaurant. 4 o'clock. My restaurant.
Okay. I'll ask the question that I often hear asked, and I really found a reasonable answers, but not an answer that ever actually sticks, is give some piece that you can say about guilt. It seems like a kind of a cultural norm here in the West. And you were speaking earlier about how rubbing onto those negative. Guilt is a piece that.
How you define guilt? How would you define it?
How would I define it? Some kind of culpability for something.
Culpability. I think I understand that word.
That perhaps I might think I've done, or I have done, or.
But in the Buddhist tradition, they do acknowledge the place of, say, remorse. If one does something wrong, it's natural to feel remorse for it. And to me, I would define guilt as repressed remorse. You don't acknowledge your remorse, you think you can get away with it. So you repress it, or you ignore it, or you push it under unconsciousness. Don't acknowledge the remorse that's there quite naturally when you do something wrong. So then you're always, I'll be found out. God's watching, you'll find out. To me, that's what I understand as guilt. You have this fear of being found out. And it is that fear which is more damaging to us. Whereas, the Buddha acknowledged that when you do something wrong, either against your own values or against society's values, well, it's natural to feel remorse about it. It's not appropriate, it's wrong. So, and then the Buddha encourages people then to ask forgiveness and make amends for it. There's a whole process to do that. And you start over again. Okay, you made a mistake. And the Buddha even says that it's a very positive thing to acknowledge where you've gone wrong and to acknowledge it, be fully conscious, because then you can kind of clear the slate and start over again. Because when you don't acknowledge it, there's all kinds of reasons. I mean, I think, especially for people who think a lot, we try to rationalize and say, well, it's just a minor thing, never mind. But it is, to us, wait a minute, it's back again to haunt us. And if we just say, well, I made a mistake, okay, fine. Start over again. It's like when you bring it into your consciousness, it can go out of your consciousness too. But if you don't acknowledge it, it just eats away at us, And this is, primarily this is for, it would apply also to just imagine wrongs too. So, in our monk tradition, for example, whenever a senior monk is going away somewhere, we do the ceremony of asking for forgiveness. Even though I just in the monastery in Kamloops, and I was only there 9 days, and they made a ceremony of asking for forgiveness, and they actually say this out loud. We apologize if we did anything wrong to you, and I can't think of anything. Once been here 9 days, and I was mostly living in a hut in the forest, not talking to anybody. What could go wrong? Mind you, that one day that meal wasn't quite cooked. But it's sort of like, I see this as, I personally don't like ceremonies, but I see this as a very valuable one, that people make the gesture to acknowledge that they want to welcome you and they try the best they can, but sometimes they make a mistake. Please forgive us for that. We had good intention, but we didn't do it properly. Okay, yeah. And then they can just wipe the slate clean and don't even worry about it. So it's a very beautiful act, beautiful service and activity, and just reminding you to keep refreshing and keep reviewing your life. And you don't carry the stuff with you all the time.
Yeah, I'm thinking how we sometimes get attached to our burdens.
Yeah. And it is, if we understand that the kind of principle behind the Buddha's teachings and the way of practice and the way of liberation is about, we suffer because we hold on. And it's all about letting go, surrendering to the way things really are. Not surrendering to your own ego and its own agenda. You're surrendering to the way things really are. So you need to see more clearly the way things really are, and then we open to it more and more, and then you just flow with it then. More flow, and there's less conflict, less suffering personally, and more in harmony with things. So having these ceremonies sometimes are very helpful. For us in the monastic life, every fortnight we recite our rules. So first of all, we have a ceremony to acknowledge any faults we've done, any mistakes we've done with our rules, and then we recite the rules over again to remind ourselves what they are and start over again every fortnight. So sometimes it's very, especially to make them conscious, you have to remember in your mind that we have 227 rules to remember. Now that I get older, I begin to forget it. I got the book with me to remind. There's only about 50 that we really are important. Most of them are very minor anyway. So. Yeah. We have a translation to English now too, so we know what they are actually. There's two sides to it. One is now it's become more like a formal ritual of the community. All the monks in that community gather together in this one ritual. We did think originally coming to the West we'd do it in English, but then it's only for those who understand English then. But if it's kept in the Pali language, then monks anywhere in the world, basically, I mean, at least in the Theravada countries, can join in it communally in this ritual of kind of affirming our community allegiance together. And then those who want to, want to look at it in English can. There's a translation, so you can review it, what the rules actually are themselves. It has a dual purpose.
Question about that.
Yeah.
Does not, and I understand that they're using guilt as a sentiment to say, okay, I won't do it again, but in the whole ritualizing of the begging forgiveness, isn't that a bit like the Christian model of, well, God will forgive me so I don't think about it anymore, and then you can just go and do it all over again?
It could, yeah. The danger with rituals, they become blind rituals. But we try to encourage people to know what they're saying and what to do, and we explain it to people, you see. So like at this situation, the abbot explained to the people who were there what the purpose was, what we're doing, what the meaning of it was, so they can enter into it with their heart.
So you need a fairly strong intentionality not to do it again.
Yeah. That's ideal. That's the ideal, which would try and be reminded by that ritual. If you didn't have that ritual, maybe you wouldn't be reminded of it. So you mean you can use rituals, or you can be used by them. You do the ritual and you think that absolves me now because I've done the ritual. But if you're a meditator, you know that doesn't work. If you know your own mind, then you can't fool yourself with these things.
I have another question about, and I struggle with this all the time, you talk about letting go. I think that's just so difficult. Do you have tips or tricks? Because everybody says, you gotta just let it go, but how?
Yeah. I mean, it has become a little bit of a cliche word these days. I mean, I use it in the sense of a kind of you could say kind of a guidance, as it were, of letting go, because so much of most of our cultural attitude is getting. So if people want to get enlightenment, they want to get peace of mind, they want to get, but it doesn't work that way. You can't get it. You get peace of mind when you let go of your wandering thoughts. When you let go of the wandering mind, then the mind becomes peaceful and you get peacefulness. Or you arrive at peacefulness, if you like, or something. But you want to get tranquility, you want to get peacefulness of mind, your getting gets in the way. It's not a natural calmness of mind. It's constricted and it's crushed and it's become a thing now, not a flow of life. I mean, how it functions in the Buddhist system is that when you see the way things really are, and you see that you're holding on, and these thoughts, how much they're disturbing you and how much they are causing you difficulty and disturbance and suffering, let them go. You got to see as we would say, you got to see the danger of them. You got to see the suffering of them first. As Ajahn Chah used to say, you got to pick something up first before you put it down. You pick it up with mindfulness or awareness, and you notice how heavy it is, and you say, why am I carrying this? It's so heavy. Oh, put it down then. Most of us don't know that yet. We're always carrying, but this is the nature of ego. It wants to have things, wants to carry things. The subject needs an object to affirm itself. So it always needs things, it holds on to them. It turns calmness into a thing. I want to be calm. My ego wants to be calm. I want it. But real calm only comes when you put down all those ego baggage, and the mind is really calm. the same time, the ego is a bit nervous and frightened and, don't let go of me, please.
So in order to let go, you really have to acknowledge.
Yes, this is heavy, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I say, when you notice your mind is in the past and whirling around and you understand, you have this at least understanding that the past is already gone. Why are you doing that? Why are you carrying the past? It's already finished. You know, it's beyond your control now. So, this is ridiculous. What am I doing this for? Let it go. At least, you know, the attitude is that, or the intention is that, okay, it comes back again because it's an old habit. We trained our mind to be that way, to function that way, and it's a habit tendency. But the first realization, why am I doing that? It's heavy. It's a waste of time. Then let it go. It comes back again, and let it go, let it go, let it go. And the more that we change our attitude to these experiences, then we find, we notice after a while that we aren't worrying about the past so much anymore.
So when you're letting go though, do you say that?
I mean, ideally it's a real insight. That's what insight meditation is. You have a deep insight. Wow, this is so heavy. Let it go. And they, wow, there's aha. That's what letting go feels like. See, ideally you have this insight into this process, and then you have a deep, something deeply inside you is touched and it changes. And then, okay, maybe practically you have to now apply this principle, not just a one-off experience, but apply this principle every day, moment by moment. But you try and keep that insight nurtured then and alive in you, that it keeps feeding this and keeps it alive. Oh yes, right. That experience of letting go, that's the way, that is the way. Now keep generating it and nourishing it, and it begins to grow into your life. And after a while, wow, it begins to work a bit more naturally then. Such that you don't have to work at it anymore. It just becomes a new way of being. Sounds great. We sit here and talk about it.
You were talking earlier about how with some calmness of the mind you see things you put away, put out of sight, buried, and I find that growing awareness of how much I've buried is kind of it's a terrible fuel for the mind, that knowledge. And I wonder how to work with that so that it doesn't become the hell that you talked about.
Is this about the thought of that, or the things that you buried? That you find a fuel for
it's
the
about
mind?
the thought, the preoccupation with it. Especially, you spoke about the past. I find that, let's say it's a fear. Fears of the future to be more difficult to deal with somehow because they can recur so easily. We face them all the time. And, especially as you get older and you realize you have less time to work with this.
And less energy too.
And less energy.
Maybe usually, initially, some of these things come up more, I would say, like a personal memory or something, other personal thing. Then you realize, hey, where'd that come from? Oh, I've suppressed that personal memory. But then you begin to maybe more helpful to look at it then first of all, it's more personalized, and you begin to notice them more as these kind of patterns now. It's just this mental stuff, repressed memory, now becomes more, a little bit of a less personal aspect of ourselves. It's just a process we've engaged with. You don't have to then bring up every personal item of your past and go through them, sift through them one by one by one by one. You kind of, now you kind of generalize it now. This is repressed memory. It's just like, you know, initially maybe you see a certain thought about the past, or your mind going to the past about a certain thing. But then you can generalize it, oh, there's memories of the past. I don't have to check out and do letting go with every single memory of the past I ever have. It's just memories of the past, it's memories. So now you know how to relate to memories. Now you know how to relate to repressed memories. It's just more stuff, more mental imagery. It's more mental activity. That's all. So you generalize it more, and that's, I say, in the meditative process, as you get more insight into, you know, first of all, it's very personal. That's where we're coming from. Very personal stuff. But really the Buddha's pointing at, looking at these things less personally. They're more general. They're just thoughts. First of all, it's my thoughts, and they're really important, and they're really precious, and they're really, it's just thoughts. It doesn't matter if they're intelligent or not, they're just thoughts. And we know thoughts arise and pass away. It doesn't matter if they're, you know, my precious thought. They're still going to arise and pass away. Everybody's thoughts arise and pass away. And then you generalize them, you sort of depersonalize them, as it were. You see them just as thoughts, just as memories, just as images from the past. And then, you looking at it that way, they kind of all get kind of lumped together, and then now you're observing them at a more diverse or more universal pattern then, rather than personal. And you do this more and more, and there are deeper levels, and it's more universal, and less personal, less personal, less personal. The way things are is totally impersonal, totally universal. At that level, your thoughts, your repressed thoughts, don't mean anything, or mean very little anyway.
Could you use the same process with the fear of the future?
Yep.
The thoughts, just
Yep.
thoughts like
Yeah, yeah.
arise.
Yep, these are fearful thoughts arising. Yeah. And then you recognize, you can see the universality of it. You know, there is my mortality is becoming more evident to me. So it's quite natural that fear can arise because it's very uncertain, and who knows what will happen. You know. But you depersonalize them more and more as you see them, and you universalize them more and more. And that's okay. That's the way it is. And then get more open, more space in your heart too to receive it. If we only looking at our world is very, very small, and the world beyond ourselves is bigger and bigger and bigger. The more you get open to the world beyond yourself, the more spacious your mind becomes. And the more peaceful you are, because it's closer to the universal reality. Your personal one is, you know, all over the place, and a very small part of it. It's like trying to see the whole picture in the room by just pixel at a time. It's like forever to put the picture together, but when you step back and look at the non-self, the impersonal part picture, that's much more bigger than little me. You can get little bits and pieces. So should we have a break? Should we have maybe a 15-minute break, stretch break, toilet break, etc.? And for those who are interested, we return at 4 o'clock. We can have some experience of meditation, some guided meditation. Some more questions and answers.